Okay, so I want to show you in a little bit more detail how to use these date functions that your textbook has on starting on page 105. Now, this is sort of optional, but it's definitely falls under the category of a cool Excel trick. And once you know it, of course, you'll know it and you'll have it. So it's worth the time getting your head around. It's not strictly necessary, like I said. I personally worked all my life without using these functions until I really dug into this textbook in the context of using it for an independent study. Okay, so first thing is I'm going to open up a new sheet here so that I can have a blank slate to use to explain this stuff to you. Okay, so date functions. Let's review what it means for Excel to look at a date in general. So if I write today's date, which I think is the 7th, right, 2020, right, it just goes in there. It says, actually, let's make this a little bigger so you can see. There. Okay, so it just goes in there as 2720, but up here in the actual formula bar, it's recognizing it as 2020, right? So here it's showing up as 20 because that's the way I wrote it, but up here it knows that I'm talking about 2020. So already we have a hint that Excel is a little bit smarter about dates than we are. If I go and autofill, it'll add a day, which is really convenient. Right, so again, and Excel is smart about dates. Now, Excel thinks of a date as a discrete number which represents the number of days since the dawn of time, basically, or the dawn of Excel time. So if I say I just want it in a number format and not a date format, it gives me this weird number, right? 43,000. This represents the number of days since, I can't remember what the opening date was for Macs. If you've got a Windows machine, it'll be a slightly different number because Windows starts the beginning of time at a different date than Mac does. But you get the idea, right? And so if I do this next number here, right, you see how it's just one more. So that's how it knows, right? Now there are many different options for formatting dates. And here in this drop-down menu, they'll just say short date or long date. If you say long date, right, it'll say Friday, February 7th, Saturday, February 8th. If you say short date, there it is, right, what we just had. Now, that's only the beginning, right? This is just to get it through your head that a date is actually a serial number, right? A date is a serial number. We'll write that down here. Representing the number of days that have passed since the beginning of time. Of their time, right? So, got a typo here. So that's what a date is. Now, if I type 27, right, it auto formats it into a different date format, but it still recognizes the date as the same thing, right? So there's a whole bunch of formatting options for dates, and as a matter of fact, if you go into the drop-down menu here, so rather than going up here into this quick click, formats, if you come in here and right-click and go Format Cells, and then if you look at the different date formats, there's numerous date formats. Okay, so so there's that. Okay, so that's what dates are. Now, given that Excel calculates based on the number of days that it elapsed, basically it calculates dates, you can do a bunch of useful things. Okay, now We are using this in the context of a cash budget, a forward-looking cash budget, or a pro forma projection, right? We're trying to do cash projection, or pro forma they're called, right? Forward-looking projections. So I just paused the video for a minute. I had to take a call. So hopefully I'll be able to figure out where I just was. So we're trying to create a forward-looking cash flow projection, or cash budget projection, or what we call a pro forma. And so because it's forward-looking, right, things can change. Right, things can change. And so, you know, in this example, this is for an existing business. They want to do a budget for, what was it, June through September, right? Other examples, though, of creating these things have had to do with startup companies or companies that are trying to do a major expansion. So you'll do a cash flow projection a year in advance so that they can try to get financing. And then, you know, as time goes on, the dates change, right? Their expectation for what their sales are going to be don't change necessarily, or they can, but, you know, but the dates change. So we have to be flexible about how we define the dates that we're talking about in a cash budget. So in this case, right, we are trying to fill in the column headings for April through October, right? That's what we're looking at the beginning, right? So August, September, October, right? So I can do an autofill like this. Here, let's make column B a little, make all the columns the same width. There, all right. So I can do an autofill and just pull these dates, these months apart across. But what happens, right, if we want to change the beginning date of our projections to March? So if I say I want to change this to March, right, nothing else changes. There's no actual formula in here, right? So in order to get this thing to readjust, I need to do once more an autofill. I need to do it manually. So let's start it back in April again. Actually, you know what? Let's start it in January because I want to show you something. All right, so let's say that we are looking at a budget that starts in January, and I pull my dates across. I do autofill, and I get all these months, January through July. Now, things change. I decide I want to start in February. Well, you know, I have to recalculate this stuff. So being a smart gal, right? I'm like, you know what? How about if instead of just autofilling the month names, I say, because I know that this can represent a number, right? How about if I say I want this to be January plus 30, plus 30, plus 30, plus 30, right? So that should push me forward once a month. So how about if I say then, we'll have our first month be January, and then our second month, we'll make it January plus 30. Well, that's not going to work. But easily enough, right, I can change this to actually have it be a date that Excel recognizes. And now, right, it recognized the date and it made me a date that was 30 days later. Now, it is formatted here as not as a date, but I can easily enough change it to a date. But, look, if I add 30 days to January 1st, I wind up in February, except I'm not in February yet, right? I'm still in January. Moreover, if I continue this, I'll skip February altogether. I'm already in March. Okay, well, how about, and you can see where we go with this, right? How about if I say, okay, I'll start on the 4th. All right, now I'm in the right month, but I'm not on the same day of the month. right? And so this date functionality is what we have that we can use to get around that. Okay, so Excel has these date functions. I'm going to hide all this stuff, right? So that we can start where the book starts. Okay, Excel has date functions. Okay, and these date functions will look at a serial number, a date. So let's say 1/1/20, 20. It'll look at that date, and let's format this as a serial number. Actually, you know what? So these are the same date, right? January 1st, 2020 is 43,831 days from the beginning of time, right? So Excel has the capacity through these date functions to look at these serial numbers and return the month, the day, the year. So if I say, give me the year of this number, it'll give me 2020. And if I say, let's say, what's the next function? Month, right? If I say, give me the month of this number here, it'll give me month 1, January. And if I say, give me the day, it'll give me the first month, the first date. If I change this number, if I add 5 to it, right, it's still in January, but now it's January 6th. I can tell that because if I go to the date, right, now it's 1/6. If I say that it's, 2/6, right, it'll give me 2, February. Right, so Excel knows what the dates are. Okay. So then what we do, we can format what we're returning here in specific formatting. And I'm going to pause this for a minute and make sure I get this right. Okay, so I've got my wits about me now. Now here's how we're going to explain this. All right, we want to autofill column headings that look like, right, so I'm going to write in the words first, April, and then we'll just autofill these. So this takes us out to October. So we'll call this our plain autofill row. Okay. Now what we want is a calculated date row. Okay, it's going to look the same. You know what? Let's do one unformatted first. All right. So we are going to start 4/1/2017. That's the date that he's using in your book. So here it is, 4/1/2017. And now, right, instead of having this next column be just this number plus 30, what we're going to do is use a more complicated date function that's going to go, we want year, so it's all going to be referring to this one. It's going to be the year of this one, and the month is going to be April, which would return month month 4, and we're going to say it's going to be that plus 1, which will give us month 5. And then the day is going to be the same day, the first of the month. Close the paren, and we'll see what that gives us. It did not give us the right thing. Why? Oh, I see why. It's a question of the parenthesis. So it's a question of the parenthesis in the month piece of this function. All right, so this is looking at a month that includes sort of this number, the whole serial number, 43,000 and whatever, plus 1, which would just get me to, you know, the next day in April. So what I need to do is put a parenthesis here, get rid of this parenthesis there, right? So now we have month B35, which is April. It'll give us 4, and then add 1 to that after we close the parenthesis. That'll give us May. Fingers crossed. Yes. Okay, so this works. So we can go ahead and autofill all of this out here, right? But now, right, we don't want these to be given as dates like that. So what we want to do, let's copy this stuff down to another row, Command C, Command V, format to show month only. And again, I am going to pause this to make sure that I can explain this clearly. Okay, so to explain this clearly, we're just going to do another one of our custom formatting things. So if we go here, and then we go more number formats and go custom, and right now what it's got is month, day, year, year, right? You see that? And what we want to do is scroll down here, and here's the MMMM, and you know what? I just realized that's outside the, there we go. So this, we're going to use MMMM, which means month, many letters for the month, right? And there it is. Okay, so you go to the custom formatting, and I'll do that again. Custom, and then you just scroll down through all the custom formats until you get to the one that says MMMM. If your list of custom formats doesn't include that, then you just enter these 4 M's, and it'll stay in your list for you. For me, this might already be in my list because I've done this before. Okay, hit OK, and there we have our formatted, calculated column headers. Okay, so that's how you do that, right? I'm going to go over to the other sheet. I'm going to pause this recording, go over to the other sheet, and then show you the last little trick. Okay, the last thing we want to do is really kind of magical. I love this stuff. I'm such a weirdo. So now that we have all of these column headers calculating as serial numbers, we can now take and use this calculated formula as part of our header up here through a process called concatenation. And your book is kind of interesting because you can tell it's gone through many iterations, right? This is the 8th edition, and I'm sure that back when he started doing this, there weren't these shortcuts, and you would have to actually say concatenate. And let me actually, I'm going to go to the other sheet. I'm going to show you some concatenation things that I've done, which will kind of explain how the function works, right? So concatenation, text strings. Okay, so let's say you pulled down a database that had first name. Actually, I'll go over here. And last name, and prefix. Right, so Tammy, Warner, doctor. And I'll just pick another name. God, I can't think of any. Sean Griffin. Mr. Okay. All right, so here's some names. You know, Katie Campson. Ms. That's my daughter. All right. So I have this database, and it came in with all these, you know, first names and last names and prefixes, right? And I want to put those all together into one text string. Again, I'm going to pause it just to make sure I do it right. Okay, it worked beautifully while I was off camera. So watch this. So if I go equals concatenate, and I want to say Dr., comma, Tammy, comma, Warner, close the paren, right? This will return for me Dr. Tammy Warner with no space, right? So you have to kind of get a little bit, you know, picky-uni with this, right? So if I say concatenate and I say Dr., comma, and then my next piece of text needs to be a blank. So in order to indicate that it's a blank, I got to go quotation mark and then a space and then a quotation mark, comma, right? And then, let's see, so that was Doctor, and then I want Tammy, comma, quotation mark, space, quotation mark, comma, and then Warner, close the paren. Now it should give me Dr. Tammy Warner, right? So there's that. If I copy that down, this will give me Mr. Sean Griffin and Ms. Katie Campson, right? So that's concatenation. Now, Excel, in the years since this guy published his first edition and since I started working with it, Excel has made it a little bit more efficient to do that, right? So instead of using the word concatenation, you could say, right, you could say, and again, I'm going to put this on pause so make sure I do it right. So instead of using the word concatenate in this long word here, you could, if you wanted to, doesn't really matter, but you could use an alternative syntax and just use the ampersand sign to indicate that you're going to be joining things. So what you would do is you would say, you'd put the ampersand in, then you'd say, wait, equals Doctor, and then an ampersand, and the quote with a space, and an ampersand, and Tammy, ampersand, quote, space, quote, ampersand, Warner, and that should come out. Yep, there it is. All right, so this is a little bit easier to type. It gives you the same thing. It acts the same, right? So we see the same sort of combination or concatenation of the text strings. So that's how that works. So now we are almost there, right? So again with the pause and going back. Hang on. We are back to our first page. All right, so we need to do a concatenated phrase which not only uses the values in row 4 here, but also translates those numeric values into the text version of them. Okay, so we are going to hit equals, and then we are going to indicate that it's text by using a quotation mark, and then we are going to say for the period, and then we add a space, and there, that is our first piece of text that we are going to concatenate. It has a space at the end. Use that ampersand sign, and now, right, we need to do one last function. We need to translate the value in cell E4 here, which is some number, 43,000 whatever, we need to translate that value into text. So we use what's called a text function. We say text, oops, not text, text. Okay, here's our value here in cell E4, put in a comma, and then the format for that, just like the format for row 4 in general, is going to be that MMMM, our month. Oop, and we need to have a quotation mark there to indicate that it's going to return a text value. Close that parenthesis, right? So this is our next value, right? We add another ampersand to indicate the next thing we're going to do. And then, let's see, we need a space, I think. Yeah, we need a space, and then we say through, or to, and give it another space there, I guess, and then give it another text that we're going to string, and this is going to be the text value out here in column 8. And hope to God that it works, because this is a complicated statement here. Text, the value is column H4, and the format is quotation, quotation, close the parenthesis. Fingers crossed. Here we go. Yep, for the period June to September, and it even has the right spaces where they belong. Right? It's going to take you multiple attempts to get this. That's fine. But the thing is, right? If we decide that we're going to do this from a different date, if we say that we are beginning our budget in January, look, the whole thing's change, right? Not only do these month headers change here, but the whole title of the report changes as well, which I think is just freaking awesome. All right, so have fun with that. Maybe I'll make a better video in the future, but maybe it was clear. Okay.